Hello, everyone. Joe Zeleznik from NDSU Extension. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry I'm in my field clothes today, not looking my professional best, but that's okay. Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about our project, Improving North Dakota's Arboreta. I'm working with my student, Steve Ahrenholz, on this. I introduced Steve last year at the tree promotion meeting. Oh, there we go. There's a picture of him on the left and yours truly on the right up in a tree, of course. Last year, we asked this question at tree promotion: does your SCD have an arboretum? And many of you said yes, and you contacted Steve, and Steve went out this past summer and did a lot of inventories of these arboreta, not just the SCD arboreta, but several others throughout the state. And he's going to talk about that today. In the presentation, I want to point out we're going to use two terms. We're going to use the term arboreta or arboretums. Either is correct, the plural of arboretum. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve. Thanks.
Hello. So as Dr. Zeleznik said, my name is Steve Ahrenholz, and today I want to discuss my project with you. I'm going to discuss what has been happening with my project, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Z, and he will discuss the future of the project. So, why am I doing this project? Well, North Dakota has a lot of arboretum, roughly 25 arboreta in the state, and we want to better our understanding of these arboreta. We want to know about the specifics like location. So here's a map of North Dakota's arboreta, and I will elaborate on this slide in a little bit. But we also wanted to understand some of the species dynamics of these arboreta. So we wanted to understand what species we had, what species were most common, what species did well, and which ones didn't. We also wanted to have a better understanding of the educational functionality of these arboreta, meaning how are these arboreta being used for education? And finally, we wanted to identify any opportunities for improvement. All right, so what is my project? Well, my project began last summer by building relationships with North Dakota's arboreta managers. And I want to pause and say thank you to all the managers that I have been working with. I've had really good experiences, and I wanted to pause and give a genuine thank you and let you guys know that I appreciate it. My project began last summer just as the pandemic that we're in started to really pick up traction. So that certainly affected my ability to develop some of these relationships. For example, I wasn't even able to meet all of the arboreta managers in person. What I was able to do was inventory almost all of North Dakota's arboreta. And when I inventoried them, I inventoried their species, labeling, their site conditions, and their educational functionality. So as you can see here, we're looking at a map of North Dakota. These blue stars represent SCD arboreta. The yellow stars represent city, state, or privately owned arboreta. And these four red stars you see represent REC arboreta. So that's 13 SCD arboreta, 10 non-SCD arboreta, and North Dakota's 4 RECs all have some form of established arboreta, but they're all looking to improve and or expand in some capacity. Now, North Dakota's arboreta are vastly different. They're different in regards to number of species, labeling methods, and labeling accuracy. They're different in condition of the site and maintenance of the site. We also saw large disparities in public use, how they're used, and educational functionality. So North Dakota's Arboreta have over 70 genera, and with more than 500 species, cultivars, and varieties. We saw everything from 8 species represented to as much as 400 plus. The most common species we had were amber maple and green ash. Now, it might surprise some of you to hear that amber maple was more prominent in North Dakota's arboretas than green ash. But remember that these inventories were taking of arboreta specimens, not their natural areas. North Dakota's arboreta are a diverse group. They range in size from around 8 trees surrounding a small parking lot to a massive 80-acre arboretum with nearly 5,000 plantings. The mission is also diverse. Places like the state capitol serve as an educational green space for the public. Then we have an arboretum like Absaraka, and which its mission is strictly research. Funding, as you might expect, often comes from city, county, or state governments. However, North Dakota has some amazing people that fund and operate these arboreta all by themselves. So with these disparities in size, mission, and funding, it's not a surprise that we see disparities in public use as well. Of course, location plays a role in this. For example, one of our arboreta is in the middle of a city along a walking path, while some of our SCD arboreta are in more rural spaces. We saw a variety of materials used for labeling: plastic, metal, wood, and stone. We also did find some issues in labeling. In fact, even the best labeled sites always had some that were broken, bent, or overgrown. In the top picture, we can see an example of a label that's both bent and overgrown with grass. In the bottom left, we see an example of a misplaced label. As you can see here, that label is placed inside the tree. On the bottom right, we have an example of an inaccurate label. Vaccinium macrocarpon is a cranberry. It's a cranberry that is native to swamps and bogs, right? It's a cranberry that we pick up in the grocery store. The plant that the label was referring to is American cranberry bush, Viburnum trilobal. There are some alternatives to conventional labeling. A paper map, and then here on the bottom we have the ARS station tree map. So this map allows users to see their location in relation to a tree or shrub planting. Conditions. Well, some are well maintained, some aren't. As I've mentioned, North Dakota's arboreta are funded differently. They have different resources available and have different missions. So it's not a surprise to see these disparities between arboreta. Educational usage. Unfortunately, North Dakota's arboreta are largely underused as an educational resource. Still, almost all of them can be used passively, meaning a member of the public can walk through an arboretum and learn something simply by reading the posted information. Some arboreta still do administer active education, things like field days for both academic and public, or continuing education for groups like master gardeners, stuff like that. That concludes my portion of this presentation. I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Zeleznik to discuss the future of the project.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. So what are we going to do this summer with this project and further into the future? Well, for this summer, we're going to have some workshops outdoors, and we're going to have those throughout the state in July on Thursdays. We don't know which specific location will be on which specific Thursday, but pencil it in, Thursdays in July. These are the 5 sites we're going to have those workshops in. Western Cass County at the NDSU Absaraka Horticulture Research Farm, the state capitol right there in Burleigh County, out in McKenzie County, Watford City. We're going to go to the NDSU Research Extension Center in Ward County, Minot in Ward County, and in southwestern Grand Forks County at the Myra Arboretum. By the way, Steve used the term REC earlier. That's the Research Extension Center, not the Rural Electric Cooperative, which I've made that mistake before. Told people to show up at the REC, and well, they went to the one that I wasn't thinking of. Anyway, so we're going to have some workshops this summer. I also want to talk about educational resources, what's available, and I want this to be the beginning of a discussion. What do we need? What should we expand on? What's already available? Well, one of my predecessors years ago constructed the North Dakota Tree Handbook, and the Tree Handbook is a great resource. Now that led to another publication, the Trees and Shrubs for Northern Great Plains Landscapes book, which expanded on the number of species in the tree handbook, but actually as a document, it was much smaller. And that has led to the tree selector. We added a few more species to that, and we need to expand on that now too. It's one of my projects. So we've got those. NDSU Extension over the last couple of years, we put together a couple publications specific to a specific genus, pines, and then another one for elms. Most of these that we have, most of the species and cultivars we have in these are not really suitable for shelter belts, just so you know. Yes, there are a few that could be used, but not too many of them. We have a publication on ash tree identification as part of our emerald ash borer resources. And I know who can't identify an ash tree? Well, you'd be surprised, because ash can look like other species, especially box elder. And occasionally we get a call, somebody says their ash tree died and it's really an American elm. It happens. So we got that. And I also have a PowerPoint replacement species for ash in windbreaks. I think I may have given this as a presentation to you all. I know I gave it to folks who are looking to get their CCA certified crop advisor, some continuing education stuff for that. I have this as a PowerPoint, and that's okay. That's great, but it's not really greatly available to the public. I also have a PowerPoint, again, not a publication, on conifer identification. How can you tell the difference between a Scotch pine, a ponderosa pine, a blue spruce, Black Hills spruce, Myers spruce, even an arborvitae? Well, that's in a PowerPoint. I've also got a similar one developed for maples. I haven't made it broadly available, but again, it's just a PowerPoint and it's descriptions. It's not a key like the conifer differentiation, but I think it's pretty good. It needs a little work, not quite ready for release, but it really helps to differentiate the variety of maples. We have quite a few in North Dakota that people are planting. Of course, conservation districts have this great document, Conservation Trees for North Dakota, great resource. And thank you to those of you who put that together and expanded it. It's a great resource that I'm sure that a lot of you use, because that's actually focused on windbreaks, conservation plantings. So what's next? Of course, I have to expand the tree selector. I've thought about doing publications on how do you identify differences between the different ashes or birch or even oak trees. Birch are a real bugger. Oak, we have a better chance. Steve is working on a document for ash replacements, and we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll work on that more this spring and summer. I've thought about one for spruce identification selection, but since there's only 4 spruces, I don't know. I guess there's 5. We could talk. Anyway, with that, we're working on a couple of new arboreta, working with those NDSU research extension centers. Back years ago, Dr. Dale Herman had research sites at these four research extension centers, and those are pretty much abandoned now. But they're fairly diverse, and it's pretty amazing what's there. The one in Dickinson actually doesn't have hardly any of the original plantings. Most of those were torn out in, I think, 2005. But in Dickinson, they've started to identify their resources there, their tree resources there, as well as some of their other plantings, more ornamental, trying to make this educational for the public. And they're just using Google Earth, I believe. And they put together some maps. You can get online and look at the Dickinson Research Extension Center. And this comes up. I've zoomed in here just to give an example, and I clicked on one of those trees just to the right of the building, and it's a Siberian larch. And we've gone through these just to make sure they're correct, and they are. And we've added a few. We haven't identified every single tree because, well, some of them are awfully close to each other, and it's hard to get in there. But anyway, this is another resource, educational resource we're working on with our research extension centers. With that, I hope we can have a discussion. We've got a few minutes left, and I'm going to show a few things before we get to the discussion, and Steve's going to show a few things as well. And with that, okay. I also want to show, Steve mentioned this earlier, the ARS station in Mandan. They've got their station tree map. It's really slick. I'm zooming in here. Let's zoom in. Hey, what's that tree right there in the middle? Let's click on it. Picea pungens, blue spruce. Okay, they've got it labeled. This is great. How about down here? What are these little ones down here? Junipers. Okay, we don't know which species, but they are junipers. And this is a really great setup. I think they're using pretty high-level GIS software, Esri, so it's ArcMap or ArcGIS, things like that. With that, I'm going to head it back over to Steve. He's going to look at the North Dakota tip tool and some of the inventory work he's done there.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, so as Dr. Zeleznik said, part of my project, as well as inventorying all of these arboreta in North Dakota, I'm also uploading these into a software called Tree Plotter. And this is available to anyone to view. So the website, as you can see up here, is ndcitytrees.org. You can go to this website and view which tree is where, like clicking on this one, Ohio Buckeye. Over here, Tatarian Maple, Black Hill Spruce, and so on and so forth. And I'm doing that for all of the arboreta that I have inventoried so far. Yeah, pretty great site. It's pretty similar to the ARS station map that Dr. Zeleznik just showed you. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Joe, and we're going to take a look at some pictures.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just so you know that this arboretum here is in Castleton, North Dakota. All right, we got about a minute and a half, and I want to just show some of my favorite photos from the various arboreta. Actually, it's mostly the Myra Arboretum in western Grand Forks County. I've always said red maple doesn't grow in North Dakota, but you know what? You get outside the Red River Valley and it might have a chance. This is beautiful. I believe it's a Northwood red maple at the Myra Arboretum. This is in Park River, just a shrub, an ornamental shrub, some type of 9-bark, and it might be Dart's Gold. I'm not sure which one, but it's just beautiful. And in Park River, right along the main road there, they've got this corkscrew willow and down the side street. Park River's got a really nice arboretum. I'd highly recommend checking it out. The one thing they don't have is labels, unfortunately. This is in the city of Langdon. They've got quite a nice setup there, although their arboretum has changed over the years because of construction work here in the park. Their labels are pretty simple, you know, just something they did on the copier, put in a grommet, you got a zip tie. This label is not correct. Showy Mountain Ash, the name's not quite correct, but you can make a label out of anything. You know, it doesn't have to be metal or plastic. You can make a label out of anything you want. At the Myra Arboretum, we're trying to clean up some of the junipers. I'm sure those of you who run Arboreta, the maintenance can be a bugger. They're being invaded by all these deciduous trees. We're going to go a little long here. And it takes quite an effort to clean those up, try to keep the focus on that specimen, that juniper. And quite frankly, it's just nice to be there and see these things. I can't remember how I took this picture because there's two hands in the photo. That might be Steve Sagasser's hands. I don't remember. But you know, you can look at the pine cones early in the year, or you can look at the flowers of the crab apples, and you can frame the photo a little differently. What's in the foreground or background? That was kind of fun. Frame it this way. I think the one on the left is one of the candle crab apples or spear. I can't remember. There's so many different crab apples out there. It's pretty amazing. I believe this was gray dogwood. Can't remember. It's one of the dogwoods. I believe it was gray dogwood in late summer. Just beautiful blue fruit. Go figure. Very unique. And the spikes, the thorns on a black locust. I wanted to show that. A lot of fun. In the fall, that's a white ash in the foreground. And several, I can't even remember what those are, but that's at the Myra Arboretum as well. And just a few more fall photos. Oh man, it's just beautiful out there in the fall. So get out there, enjoy your Arboretum, and use them educationally. There's a lot of opportunity there. With that, I think we're gonna stop recording and we'll go to a discussion now. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.